You're listening to Dots, Lines, and Destinations, a travel podcast with hosts Stephen Seagraves, Fosma Moon, and Seth Miller.
Hello, and welcome to episode 355 of Dots, Lines, and Destinations. Seth running the show this week, so apologies in advance for that. Joined by Mr. Fosma Moon. Foz, how you doing?
I am well. Well. I shared with one of our common friends that we were doing the show without Stephen, and the quote was, "No adults."
Yeah, sounds about right.
And he was very excited about it.
Well, that's worrisome, I think.
Yeah.
Good to know. Ton of news this week. Fortunately, and I say we haven't, but we had a bit of a meltdown over the weekend, too, in terms of scheduling. But we'll get to that in a minute with Southwest. But first, a couple weeks ago, we had talked about British Airways and Gatwick and what the airline was trying to do there. And there's the discussion of this new subsidiary airline that they're trying to bring on board. And the union was big supporters right up until the minute they weren't. And so then the airline's like, okay, well, the union's not going to play ball. We're going to scrub everything. And they pulled all of the international services out of Gatwick short haul, but kept long haul. And now apparently the union has returned to negotiations and possibly endorses the concept again. What do you think?
Okay. I mean, I guess my first question is, how much long haul is left at Gatwick right now?
They're doing a decent amount of Caribbean.
Okay. Because I don't think any of the U.S. routes are back.
No. JetBlue is the only carrier operating U.S. to Gatwick right now, if I understand it correctly. They're definitely the only New York, and I think they're the only Gatwick.
So, I mean, a bunch of Caribbean is probably, 8, maybe 10 flights a day, if that?
I would guess it's less than that.
No, I wouldn't even say they're daily, right? So,
I mean, some of the routes are, I think, like peak season, maybe Barbados goes daily. But that was, Barbados is huge demand from the UK. That was one of the Concorde routes back in the day.
Right.
But I think it's, there's a couple. There's actually, I gotta go find it. When they announced their expanded routes for the season, right after the rules changed, they announced like a whole bunch of US routes for reopening. They added a few more routes into the Caribbean as well as part of the 380 coming back news. Islands routes, 12 flights a week to Barbados and 9 each to Antigua and St. Lucia, and they will split those between Heathrow and Gatwick. So some interesting options there.
3 routes, maybe once a day if they're splitting it.
Yeah. No, and there's more than that. Those are increases that were mentioned. So but yeah, you're right. There's not a ton. There'll be some Cuba, I bet, or there historically has been. My Nassau, when I went to the Bahamas, it was out of Heathrow. But yeah, there's some options there. They're trying, I guess. But yeah, you're right. There's not a ton of flights there. It's also, arguably interesting that they can support them without the connections from the short haul continental Europe routes. But
well, I don't know if anyone can truly make a connection. Like I have probably a dozen times tried to make a BA connection at Gatwick, and the short haul always gets delayed.
What you get for operating with one runway? The busiest single runway airport in the world, right?
Yeah, and you end up misconnecting, and then they have to put you on a bus to Heathrow, and then fly you up from Heathrow. It is. So I don't know how many people really do connect on BA.
Yeah, I'm trying to think. I think the last time I did a Gatwick connection on BA, it was actually, I think it was London City to Gatwick. I had to transit, or Heathrow to Gatwick is one of the two.
Yeah, I have tried to fly through Gatwick, do a connection through Gatwick any number of times, and
was that always the JFK long haul stuff, or?
You know what? Not JFK.
There weren't many options unless you're going to the Caribbean, as we've established. It doesn't seem to be your thing.
Well, no, there was JFK, there was Tampa,
okay.
There was Orlando at one point, right? There was a bunch of routes they were doing. They had 5 or 6 destinations, and I've tried to do any number of them with no luck.
Fair enough. You excited for the 380 to come back, British Airways? Do you care?
I don't really care. I mean, it's nice that they're coming back and not all getting scrapped.
Yeah, Miami, Los Angeles, and Dubai will get service this winter.
Good. So all the 3 flagship routes for the 380.
Yeah. Well, it's summer, or not summer, but sun and surf in some ways. I guess if you had Dubai, you could say skiing too, because for whatever reason, some people like to go ski in a shopping mall. But yeah, they're seeing demand for the sun routes for sure, or hopefully.
That's great. I mean, I imagine they got rid of all, if not most, of their 747s, right?
Yeah, the 747's gone.
Yeah, so I guess it makes sense to bring a 380 back, because beyond that, they just have the 777-300s as the largest ship.
Yeah, the 350-1000 is pretty big too. I'm not sure which has more seats for them, but yeah. Either way, now the 380 is going to have more seats, but Yeah, I'm intrigued by that, bringing them back. It's 5 frames coming back by the end of the year. They're going to do a couple, I think, Frankfurt and Madrid turns to get crew familiarization and pilot training back up to snuff.
Okay.
And that's one of the bigger challenges they had is like, I'm pretty sure, I know for the 747s and then I think also for the 380s, they let a lot of the pilot training expire or not stay current.
Yeah, it's gonna be a fair bit of work to ramp it up.
So they've got to, it's not, I think that you keep your type rating, but you got to like redo sim time and then redo actual landings to get current again. Something like that. So it's not like truly like they can't, fly the planes anymore, obviously, and they don't have to do full training from the start. But there is definitely a ramp up there and getting the flight attendants certified again as well. So
to answer your question, the 350-1000 has 14 more seats, but has no first.
Okay.
The 777-300 has first, as does the 7810.
Okay. Yeah, so a few more people, but none of them get the fancy beds. Although they get club suites, which is the nicer business class, at least.
Right.
So, interesting. One last British Airways story while we're having this joyous British conversation. The Hong Kong flight, I think it was last Friday, there were some storms in Hong Kong, and there was a bunch of planes that circled for a bit and this and that, but the BA 777 diverted.
It wasn't storms. It was a typhoon.
Well, that's a type of storm.
Yeah, it's a little more serious than a typical Hong Kong storm.
Fair. Okay, fine. I honestly I didn't look into what details were behind the weather, but okay, so there's a typhoon, sort of like a hurricane or tropical storm, but in Asia, and it caused a bunch of diversions. And diversions are bad in general, but in the COVID travel era where the rules are so wonky, this one diverted from Hong Kong to Manila.
Well, actually, did you read any of the details on the landings?
No.
So they tried to land in Hong Kong twice and aborted.
Okay.
After the second abort, they just decided they couldn't land there. And then they went to Manila because they were on reserves. And then,
which is, by the way, 700 miles out of the way. That's like an hour and a half plus flying.
Right. And then they got to Manila, but no one could get off the plane.
Right. Well, this is right. There's rules about entry and beyond just visa issues. Like, this is one of those, like, okay, do you have the right COVID details to get in at this point? So not good.
Exactly.
Yeah. And then then the crew had crew rest issues. So the pilots all had to like go take a nap. Everybody had, all the crew had to go sleep at least 8 hours or whatever. But I guess probably more because it was a longer flight. But then they finally, the next day, were able to come back.
I think 14 hours later.
Yeah.
And I think they had another missed approach coming back into Hong Kong the next day.
Oh, man. 36 hours on board a 777 trying to get to Hong Kong. And the crazy part about it is, now they got 3 weeks of quarantine.
Yeah. After all that.
So,
But, I mean, at least they got there.
Yes, safely.
And, I mean, there really isn't much more you could do, right? I am surprised that they didn't just divert to someplace, if they're going to sit on the ground, just divert to someplace in mainland China. I
think the risk there is, would the Chinese authorities let them just sit on the ground for that long? So, and, what other bits might come to pass. There's been a lot of apprehension about, we'll say, Western, European and American flight crews about touching mainland China for overnights at this point. I know and a lot of it comes down to, like, the testing in the quarantine situation is not great.
Right. But I guess, is Manila closer than, like, something in Vietnam?
Vietnam is kind of closed also.
But, I mean, they weren't going to get off the plane.
Well, it is for Saigon or for Ho Chi Minh City. Hanoi is 150 miles closer, 200 miles closer. So Hanoi could have worked. It's probably the best. That would have been the closer option. Yes, if you're just going to sit on the plane anyways, maybe Hanoi would have been smarter. But at that point, I don't know what, like, because BA historically has had service to Manila, hasn't it?
Yeah.
So, but I don't think they fly to Hanoi. So maybe you go somewhere you've got a base.
Maybe.
Or operations.
I guess Taipei wasn't an option because it's too close. I mean, I've landed in Hong Kong during a typhoon. It's never fun.
Yeah. Well, we're supposed to go on that A350 inaugural during the typhoon.
Yes.
Dulles to Hong Kong on Cathay. Their inaugural flight. We had those seats booked.
We could have made it, just 6 hours late.
Yeah. Yeah, not disappointed that I canceled that trip, although I've still never flown on a 350-1000, so maybe I'm a little disappointed.
Well, you'll get your opportunity, I'm sure.
I actually, it's funny you said I had one booked and I canceled it. I'm going to the Dubai Air Show in a few weeks, in 4 weeks now, 5 weeks now, mid-November, and was trying to put together a trip that could meet travel budget and some things. And had a toss-up between Qatar Airways and Turkish to get there. And the Qatar Airways flight had a 350-1000, I think, on the Doha Dubai or Doha Abu Dhabi segment. I'm going to one of the two, and I ended up switching and taking the Turkish flights. So
you're doing the Boston Istanbul flight?
Yep. I was going to do Boston to Doha also. I mean, both of them have that service. I think Qatar Airways isn't daily, which is one of the challenges I had for my dates. But in the end, the pricing to get to basically get under the budget for the conference and have the right number of days, it was like Qatar wanted like an 8-night or 9-night stay, and Turkish would let me get away with 7. So, and had the inventory I needed. So,
no brainer.
No, well, yeah, going might be also mean and have no brain, but we'll see. Get a night in Istanbul, which I haven't done in a long, long time, and then a night in Abu Dhabi before I go to Dubai for the work. Anyway,
so what are the requirements to leave the airport in Istanbul?
Relatively easy for vaccinated.
Good.
Yeah, Turkey has been very welcoming generally, and especially now for vaccinated Americans. I got to double check if I need a test or not, but at worst it's test plus vaccination. I think it might just be vaccination. And it could change 3 times in the next 4 weeks, but I've got a 23-hour layover, so I hope it doesn't change too much.
Hopefully.
Yeah. And then Abu Dhabi and Dubai, the UAE is pretty much wide open if you're vaccinated. I think you need to get their local app to track things, but otherwise, no big deal.
Okay.
Anyway. Southwest Airlines.
Not having a weekend.
They had a pretty bad weekend.
And it rolled into Monday, too.
Rolled into Monday. I assume it'll roll into Tuesday as well. We're recording Monday night, so, we'll all be surprised depending to see what the answer is. So backstory is Friday night, there was a little bit of weather and a slightly understaffed air traffic control center in Jacksonville, Florida. And Southwest, as a result, canceled more than 2,000 flights over the weekend, over 3 days, which does not add up.
So that's the official reason they're giving.
Right. They continue to say the weather and ATC issues on Friday night cascaded and left too many planes and crew out of position, and they didn't have sufficient reserves available to bring, new pilots in and get planes back into place and get everything moving again correctly. And I mean, we went through this with Spirit a few weeks ago, where only one airline was severely affected, despite the storms affecting theoretically everybody evenly. And then it took Spirit even longer probably to get back and sort of reset everything. But so we won't know for sure if it's longer or shorter, since Southwest isn't fully fixed yet. But it's not a good scene. Not a good scene. There's questions. There have been accusations of vaccination-related sick out by the union. Both the union and the airline have vehemently denied that. The FAA has gotten in the action on Twitter, aggressively tweeting, subtweeting, quote tweeting, and otherwise getting at various outlets claiming anything other than the facts that, as shared by the different groups, which is basically crews got out of position, we didn't have enough spare crew, and that was the problem.
I mean, could this be fallout that they just reduced staffing too much?
I think that's got to be part of it. And reduced staffing comes from a couple different levels. One was, there's retirements and buyouts early on in the pandemic. And then as they tried to ramp back up, just rehiring, especially for pilots for pilots is hard and takes time. For flight attendants, it's a little easier, but it still takes time. I don't think the issue was, outside of that. Like, I don't think it was ground handling or anything like that, where those are roles that Southwest in particular has said it's been having trouble filling, but I don't think that's been the issue. I mean, I go back and forth a little bit between you can have a employee related issues without it being a sick out or a strike. And so, right, work to rule, if you will, is a phrase of, I don't have to take the overtime. I don't have to pick up the extra trips. I don't have to do these things. And I don't remember if it was Southwest or the union said that, like, pilots were picking up open trips. They weren't completely not working, but I think there's probably a little bit of a fuzzy line in between. We absolutely did not do anything that is explicitly prohibited by the fact that we have a lawsuit pending in front of the NLB, the labor board. But also, like, things still went pretty badly. And I don't think it can only be because there were a few flights delayed on Friday night.
I mean, I think part of the challenge with Southwest is, right, the design of their network. They do a lot of short flights. And they daisy chain on top of each other, and one hiccup has a lot of downline impacts.
Yeah, and I think Spirit similarly does that, right? And there's, even hell, back in the day, not really that long ago, like 5-ish years ago, United was doing more of that as well, right? A plane would go hub spoke, different hub, rather than hub spoke back to the same hub. So you go Newark, Detroit, Chicago, Des Moines, San Francisco, or something stupid like that, rather than Newark, Detroit, Newark, and then Boston, Newark, and then whatever.
But then 3 years ago, they said, well, we're not going to do that anymore. But
so they got burned, right? And it's one of those things, it's in some ways more efficient for crew timing and aircraft utilization to have those more or less hub-bound planes and crew, but also the risk grows. And Spirit has the same problem, or a similar approach to aircraft routing. And when they had their issues 2 months ago, a similar sort of cascading effect throughout the network. I'm trying to remember, it was when Southwest launched LaGuardia service, and to address this issue as you described it, they explicitly, because LaGuardia was so delay prone, they dedicated a subfleet, essentially.
What's funny, in the last few months, I've noticed that United has started doing a lot more out and backs from Newark.
Yeah.
So they're starting to do it again, at least out of Newark.
What, out and backs, or you mean like hopping through?
No, out and backs. So they stopped doing out and backs like 3 years ago.
They've gone through that cycle a couple times. I think 5 years ago they were doing sort of call it through flights or whatever, and they got burned as they switched back to the out and backs, but it's less efficient. And so it's sort of once they got things stable again, they probably switched back again, and now they're back again. And if I could keep saying back again, no one will know what I'm talking about at all. It'll be great.
It's just a cycle. They'll go back and forth and realize that neither is perfect.
Yeah, well, it's like everything in this industry, the airlines, like, oh no, things are going well. We can tweak it a little bit. We can try to exact a tiny bit more profit out of everything. And for months, if not years at a time, that'll work. But when it fails, goodness, does it fail incredibly.
Oh, yeah. Well, I mean, I read a statistic. This goes back to a conversation we had a few weeks ago, that at least domestically, capacity is back to 86% of pre-COVID levels domestically.
Yeah, that sounds about right. I'm actually surprised it might be that low. It's damn close to it's.
At least for United.
Okay, yeah. No, I think overall, just especially because Spirit and Frontier and Allegiant and a few, like, they're so much smaller airlines, but they've grown significantly in the last, in this year, in 2021. They've recovered so much faster. I mean, Spirit just signed another lease for 20 more planes over the next 3 years, in addition to everything else they've been working towards. So they're not screwing around. They're ready to keep growing,
which is good.
I don't know. I mean, you can start flying Spirit now as they grow at Newark.
No, I'm not getting on a Spirit plane. And besides, they're more likely to focus on Atlantic City.
No, man, they won that lawsuit against the FAA. They want Newark slots.
Good. I mean, it'll force everyone else to drop their prices.
Yeah. So anyway. Good luck, Southwest. Hope you're, recovered and not stupid going forward. Air India?
Going back to where it came from.
Back to where it came from. The Tata Group, Tata and Sons Group, has purchased the airline. The deal hasn't closed, but the deal has been announced. Taking on like $2 billion in debt plus $400,000 in cash, fronted, plus, and that's just to get, sort of get the brand and the planes, or some of the planes, and get things starting moving. There's a ton of expenses. It's been interesting to see some of the news that's cropped up sort of since the deal was announced late last week, in terms of like the 787s are half grounded at any given point in time because of maintenance deferrals.
That's what I was going to say. I mean, is it from an acquisition standpoint, does it, given how poorly maintained their entire fleet is, does it even make sense to take the fleet in the current market versus just going out and leasing new planes?
Just like take the existing ones and scrap them? Yeah.
Let them disappear as part of the bankruptcy.
I don't think the government would keep them. Whatever, the deal's done now, and the government wasn't keeping them. So, but that is an interesting question. Like, could you negotiate? No, we just want the brand and the slots, and we'll go find our own planes.
Yeah, because the amount of money they're going to have to invest to bring those planes to reasonable shape is going to be a fair bit, and it's not just money; it's time.
Yeah, no, it is both a lot of money and a lot of time. And I guess for better or worse, part of the good news is like the planes aren't all completely broken. But yes, getting 5, 787s fully back up and inspected and whatever, while still getting the rest of the planes up and running, because keeping the rest of the 787s running, because they've basically been cannibalizing these grounded ones for parts and whatnot.
But you also don't know what's wrong with the 5 that are running, right? It's not like they're in perfect shape.
That's fair. I think, from my perspective, one bit of good news is a comment that they do plan on finally upgrading the in-flight entertainment systems and bringing some of that stuff back up to sort of modern levels. So
they're going to stop using 8mm?
No, there's a real touchscreen, old, like 3 generations ago touchscreen.
So the ones United ripped out? Basically.
You sort of can judge the age of your IFE system based on the dimensions of the bezel around the screen, and these are big. But no, I still think it's interesting. Someone shared the note that Tata paid double for the Air India brand compared to what Jet Airways bought. Whatever, I don't remember the name of the brand Jet Airways bought when it sort of did its thing the first time around. Say nothing of the fact that someone else is also trying to bring Jet Airways back again next year and has, I believe, closed on the deal to buy that brand out and sort of recover it. And someone else is starting a new low-cost carrier in India because that seems like a great way to go from being a billionaire to a millionaire.
I mean, if they want to keep rebranding, resurrecting these brands, can they just do what software does and add a version number at the end?
Air India 2.0, Air India 2.2. Like, what version are we up to now?
Eastern 6.0.
Well, yes. Eastern 3, I think, is what we're on now. 3.1, if you count their new cargo operations. 3.11.
3 or 4? I thought this was the 4th iteration. Maybe I'm confusing it with Pan Am.
Yeah. I mean, well, the Pan Am trains is 4, isn't it? Anyway. No, because there was the original Eastern that then folded into Continental. When it came back, is it Eastern the one that was based in Newport News?
I think so.
Yeah. And then that collapsed, and then the third one came back and was doing charter stuff and and finally got into passenger stuff. So I think this is just the third one. And then the cargo is 311 for work groups. Anyway.
Did you know that the headquarters for the Pan Am trains is North
in Portsmouth?
According to Wikipedia, the headquarters is in North Billerica, Massachusetts for the trains.
Interesting. I think the airline was in Portsmouth.
Yes, the airline was in Portsmouth, but the trains was in a suburb of Boston. I mean, I've been in Billerica, and it's just like, you wouldn't expect much. But hey.
Yeah, I wouldn't expect an airline to be based in Portsmouth either, so, For an airline that's based there, they do very little flying, so it's disappointing.
You'd think they could make money just shipping passports.
Fair point, yeah. I actually drive past that facility all the time. The State Department's main passport processing facility is in suburban Portsmouth, New Hampshire, for people who didn't get Foz's reference there. Singapore, you gonna go back?
At some point, I need my lime juice. But I'm not going to let Steven pick the hotel.
Now, you don't like saying the Yellow Submarine?
Oh, no. Well, they've deflagged from Starboard Marriott anyway, so...
Have they? Okay. Yeah. That's an episode that y'all can go back and listen to from a few years ago. But the sort of verified travel lanes are coming to Singapore, and they're adding a whole bunch of more countries. The U.S. is one of them. I think Australia, there's a handful of others. Like 8 new countries were being added, but the website crashed under demand when this was announced. Like, people seem to be very, very excited about going to visit Singapore, and for a variety of reasons, I don't understand that.
To go shopping.
But why would you go all the way to Singapore to go shopping?
Lime juice?
Okay.
I mean, they do have some really good food there.
Yeah. No, I mean, I don't find Singapore as a long-term destination, and we've talked about this many times in the past. I think it's fine for 24, 48, maybe hours, maybe 3 days, and that's mostly to acclimate for jet lag. Otherwise, it's not my cup of tea.
I think our producer described it best a long time ago, and I asked him about going to Singapore. He goes, you go to Singapore on your way to somewhere else. It's a good place to stop for a few days, but it's not the destination. Yeah.
And so right now, a lot of the onward destinations that one typically would go to in the sort of Southeast Asia region are still closed to Americans. Thailand is sort of starting to open up maybe a little bit.
But you might go to Singapore for business, right? That is a valid reason to go to Singapore. There is a banking sector, and I think there's some trade shows that they're trying to do too.
Yeah, and I would say, and just like general trading, there is business happening there, technology stuff as well. So not manufacturing necessarily, or not a huge volume of manufacturing. But one of the other interesting things about it, though, is, as I understand it, they are going to require digital verification of vaccination status.
Okay.
Which most Americans can't provide.
So how do you get in?
Well, right now, for a lot of Americans, you probably still can.
I mean, they're restarting Seattle and I think you said San Francisco, right?
Yeah. Well, yes. The Seattle is a tag flight from Vancouver.
Well, remember, Seattle, Vancouver existed before pandemic.
Singapore?
Yeah.
Okay.
They started that. I think they started. I know it was supposed to start.
Yeah. I thought they announced Seattle. I didn't remember the Vancouver tag part. I don't remember the tag part. But
No, the Vancouver part wasn't, but Seattle, Singapore was.
Right. So now the restart is going to be seasonal 4 times a week, Singapore, Vancouver, Seattle, and then reverse Seattle, Vancouver, Singapore. If I'm reading this correctly. And what's really interesting is that, and it's for the winter, from December 2nd to February 15th, 2 of the flights will operate as VTL, Vaccinated Travel Lane Services, for quarantine-free entry. The other 2 will not, I guess.
How does that work?
Yeah, you quarantine when you get there.
Okay, so depending on the day you travel, you might not have to quarantine versus you might have to?
Yes.
That's confusing.
They're using different flight numbers, at least. Yes, Singapore, SIA will also operate SQ27, a twice weekly Seattle-Vancouver Singapore service that is not a designated VTL flight. This would cater to customers who are ineligible to enter Singapore under the VTL arrangement. But I have to assume there's enough cargo coming that justifies those flights.
From a passenger perspective, right? And your average passenger will not know at time of booking what flight number is what.
Yeah, I mean, if you're booking directly on the Singapore side, I'd like to think there's some indications thereof, but booking through a third party or something like that could get super interesting.
Yeah.
So, VTL services from Amsterdam, Barcelona, Copenhagen, London, Los Angeles, Milan, New York, Paris, and Rome from next week, and Seoul from November, on top of the existing services from Brunei, Frankfurt, and Munich.
But if they're doing VTL from JFK and LA, but they're requiring digital validation, how does that work?
So interesting you say that. California and New York are 2 states that provide it.
So you have to be originating from those places.
So the California has a health pass, and that is validated and verified by the state. It's not mandatory, but you can. And New York has I think it's the Excelsior Plus pass. Is like there's the Excelsior Pass, and then the Plus version of it. And the Excelsior is sort of just like a generic QR code, but the Plus is validated and verified by the state. So.
But what if you don't have a phone, like a smartphone? Like you're just SOL?
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, I didn't put this on the topic list, but in Malaysia, AirAsia is going to 100% mandatory check-in on their app because they're restarting this week as well. They're restarting interstate travel within Malaysia. So I think it's something like 30 to 50 flights a day to start out of Kuala Lumpur, and 100% requirement of app-based check-in, and in the very near future, they're going to go to facial recognition-based boarding.
Interesting.
And period. That's it. So, maybe there's a way to be like, I don't know, I'm a stupid American, I don't have your app, but I think their answer will be like, oh, here, give me your phone and let me show you how to download it if you're from the App Store. I don't know. It's a really interesting situation to me. Certainly is going to make a lot more people use their app, and even before the pandemic hit, AirAsia was working towards this sort of super app concept, but it does food delivery and ride hailing and banking and medical tourism and all sorts of other crap, well beyond just being like a specific local airline service. So they're definitely trying to find good ways to make people use it, and it seems like now it's your only option if you're flying.
It's ironic because with the way things have been going, I've actually stopped using apps and deleting all my apps because of the data mining that's going on in the back end.
Yeah, well, that's why AirAsia wants it. They want all that data.
Yeah. So fascinating.
Yeah. Spirit Airlines, even though you're never going to fly them, Miami service just started. So they finally launched. They now serve Miami, Fort Lauderdale, and West Palm out of South Florida.
It's great. I mean, they're growing very aggressively.
Yeah. And to serve my needs, they also started the day after they launched Miami service. They launched Manchester, New Hampshire service, which I'd like to argue is more important, but I'll probably lose that fight.
Manchester to where?
Orlando, Fort Lauderdale, Tampa, Fort Myers, and they just announced Myrtle Beach as part of their inaugural launch. So it's 2 to 3x weekly on most of the routes. Or maybe it's 4 for Orlando and Fort Lauderdale, and then then Tampa and Fort Myers were alternating the other 2 days, 2 and 2. But yeah, it's
so that brings the number of airlines that fly non-regionals to 2 now.
That fly non-regional. So you put that caveat on there. Who's the second?
Southwest.
Oh, right, because they don't fly any regional. Although they still do fly to Manchester, but a fraction of what they used to before they had Boston service.
Oh, have they shrunk drastically?
Yeah, I mean, Manchester used to be the Southwest Boston hub,
Yeah,
and Providence to a slightly lesser extent. But Southwest is sort of why Manchester is a big airport at all.
That is true.
From like 20, 30 years ago. So, but then, as with many markets, Southwest finally decided to go big and get into the big city airport, and so now they've got a pretty decent operation at Logan. I would say I did take the regional flight to Dulles on United CR2, big winning.
That's new because they used to. United never really flew there. Continental used to flew there from Newark and Cleveland.
So the Newark flight just came back as well, or just got reannounced as well. But they had the Dulles market. New Hampshire to upstate New York via suburban Washington D.C. was an interesting morning.
Talk about going out of your way.
Honestly, it was about the same total travel time as if we had just driven straight through. By the time we left early enough in the morning and got to the airport and parked the car and got through security and then sat and waited and then connected and sat and waited. But we didn't want to have to drive. We were flying in and driving back and didn't want to have to drive the whole way separately coming back.
You got some cool lines out of it.
That's a theory. What else we got here? Oh, there's a building in Seattle that is going to have a 747. It's a mixed use sort of downtown building. It's going to have a 747 fuselage as part of the interior. It's like a performance venue, music, something. I don't quite understand what's going on, but it's like going to be hanging in the middle of the lobby of this building. And it turns out it's going to be an old United frame.
I mean, that's really exciting, but did they have to go for the United ones? Those are some of the most beat up ones out there.
You think you're going to be able to tell after they completely got the interior?
Oh, hopefully not, but you never know about that stench.
Oh, man. Rough crowd. They've taken the United livery off of it and are going to remove the wings and drive it up to Seattle from the graveyard, from the desert.
I mean, that's pretty awesome. I'm just surprised they didn't sell the naming rights to it.
Yeah, I guess it's been parked long enough. You wouldn't want to you wouldn't spend the money to get it back serviceable to fly it up and then take the wings off when you got there.
No, that doesn't make sense. But
you'd have to buy engines and stuff, right? Or rent engines, but whatever.
You could leave the tool up on it and get everyone excited and just make United pay you a sponsor fee.
Excited is one word.
Depending on who you are. I would get excited, but there's a number of people who would get very worked up about it.
There are, and perhaps that's why we're not doing it. Yeah, no, that's could be, but I think it's gonna be a cool interior space. I like recycling and repurposing the airframes, but this is one I'm a little skeptical of. Last topic: Air Belgium joining the big boys with a new plane.
Where are they going to fly it?
Caribbean right now. They're actually doing some interesting Caribbean routes out of Belgium and doing tag flights, even secondary services. So. I don't remember exactly which islands it was. I know it's not St. Martin because the guy I know in St. Martin was annoyed at that. But I don't think it was I may have been Martinique or Guadeloupe and then a tag flight to some other random island nearby before coming back.
Are they still flying out of Charleroi?
Yeah.
Okay.
It's close enough. I actually think that works in their favor because it's close enough to France, or it's so much closer to France.
Got it.
That they can pick up the sort of the very northwestern French region folks trying to go to Martinique and Guadeloupe.
Okay.
And keeping it. Yeah. So that's instead of those people taking a train down to Paris or whatever, they just hop over and to Charleroi and go from there.
And you don't have to deal with de Gaulle.
Added bonus. And pretty soon you'll get a new A330neo as opposed to those old A340-300s. So I don't know. It is somewhat amusing to me to see, an airline that's sort of built itself and right. Hong Kong was one of their early routes and basically almost bankrupted the company. They did some charter around the world flights. They did I saw one of them in Hanoi, I think.
Well, they did a ton of wet lease flights during the 7-8 debacle.
Oh, that too, yeah. And during the pandemic, they did a lot of cargo, or early in the pandemic, they did a lot of cargo ops into China and back. But, I give them props for sort of sticking it out and proving, at least appearing to be somewhere in the realm of profitable or functional enough to buy new airplanes. So that's a big milestone for an airline.
Good for them.
Yeah. Anything else?
No, I don't have anything.
All right. We got a couple other topics for our Patreon supporters, including some membership rewards drama and interesting lounge and scheduling conversations, skipping over hubs. So if you want to listen to that, hop over to our Patreon page and sign up. Best $2 you can spend any month. I strongly believe that. Otherwise, feel free to give us a follow on Twitter at DotsLines or leave us a comment there, ask us questions there. We'd love to hear from you. You can go to moredotsmorelines.com, but I think you'll be the only one because the site traffic is basically no. And yet we still maintain it. Go figure. And on that note, I will stop talking because I'm full of useless information now. Take care.
Have a good night.